Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and it is Tuesday, January 17th, 2012. Welcome to the Future of Education. Our special guest is Sheryl, Nussbaum-Beach. Hi, Sheryl.
Hey there. So glad to be here.
I know your close friends call you Sherry. I still call you Sheryl. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. In fact, not many people call me Sherry. You're one of those few people that know that.
Oh, sorry. The Future of Education is sponsored by my Web 2.0 Labs project, helping give teachers a voice in the conversation, and by Blackboard Collaborate. There's a new user community for those who have use Blackboard Collaborate at wecollaborate.com. This is just so much fun. If you're going to go to ISTE, the large ed tech show at the end of June, we are now kind of rebranding all of our blogger activities, and we're doing something called ISTE Unplugged. And ISTE Unplugged is it's the packaging of all of those blogger activities. Okay. Thank you. I'm getting instructions here. So ISTE Unplugged is all of the activities that we do at ISTE. We're taking EduBloggerCon and we're calling it Social EdCon. We're going to have what had been called ISTE Unplugged, the 3 days if anybody can sign up to present sessions. We're now calling that ISTE Live. We've got the Bloggers Cafe and lots more fun. So go to ISTEUnplugged.com. We've also started something really fun called Ed Incubator. This is a chance for small startups or projects of interest to education to get authentic teacher audiences. PBS NewsHour is our first client. And if you go to classroom20.com and you look up at Ed Incubator, PBS NewsHour is looking for educators to help them with their educational programming. This is really fun. I hope you'll consider doing that, and we'll send out an email about that in the next day or two. We have announced some fun conferences coming up. We're going to do a 5th anniversary celebration for Classroom 2.0. We haven't put a date on that yet, but we're very excited about that. We do have a date for a Gaming and Education virtual conference. It's going to be April 26th. AltEdCon, the Alternative Education Conference, is going to be May 10th through 12th. And then the Library 2012 Conference, Future of Libraries, will be October 3rd through 5th. And our lovely mainstay, the Global Education Conference, will be November 12th through the 16th. So these are all free. Hope you'll join us for these. Information will be posted at futureofeducation.com and Classroom 2.0. Coming up on the interview series, Thursday night, Henry Eyring is going to talk about his book, The Innovative University. He and Clay Christensen are co-authors on that book. Lee Crockett will talk next week on Literacy is Not Enough. Cable Green talks about the obviousness of open policy. David Lurcher from the library world comes back to talk about the learning commons and personal learning environments. We're going to have a panel on personal learning profiles. Lorette Lynn, the Unplugged mom, will help us kind of kick off this alt-ed theme. And you can see many more there. Fun. David Weinberg is a new name on that list on his book, Too Big to Know. David Warlick's going to come on. Alec Koros is coming on, and we're going to talk about him a little, I think, when we talk about leadership tonight. Dick Gale is going to come on and talk about appreciative inquiry and positive deviance. Oh, I'm so excited about that. And Joseph Grenny, one of the authors from Crucial Conversations, Change Anything, Influencer, is going to come on and talk about change and how we look at sources of influence for change, which I think will be really fascinating in the educational context. And our good friend Jennifer Fox comes back to heck with traditional content. She started a new school in Texas. It should be fun to talk to her. If you've missed any of the sessions, they are all recorded, and they're up in full MP3 version and a full Illuminate Collaborate version and MP3 as well. Mitch Perlstein talked about the fragmentation of the family and its impact on education. This is a question I'm actually going to ask Sheryl tonight. Ian Jukes led us through a whirlwind tour of his material. Scott McLeod was on, lots of fun. Blue Valley Caps, a terrific show if you missed that, on business-student partnership. Okay, this is your chance to tell us where you're listening from. I'm going to give you permissions now to modify the whiteboard. So to the left of the whiteboard, you should see some icons. You're looking for the star. Double-click on it, and then click on the map. And it's lovely if you shout out in the chat as well where you are, time, temperature, weather. Lots of storms coming through or starting to come through for people. Look at New Zealand. Wow, you're really giving us a boost there. As many of you know, I am in Park City, Utah this year, and Rachel, yes, we've been really missing that snow up in Park City. Look at what fun. Always fun to have a talkative, responsive group. Wherever you are listening from, or if you are listening to the recording, thanks so much for joining us. Sheryl, I've really looked forward to this session. I just can't tell you how much I enjoyed reading this book. But I want to start on kind of a little bit of a different note, sort of a broader note. What is learning? What's your definition?
That's a great question. It's a question that actually I ask people quite a bit because I think it's so important for us to think about. But I do think it is so subjective in terms of it means something very different to everyone. For me, learning is something that is self-constructed. I think learning comes from the way that I construct knowledge, the way that I'm able to schematically take the different experiences I've had and then tie meaning to whatever it is that I'm trying to master. I also think that learning is best demonstrated when I'm able to generalize whatever it is that I've been learning to other contexts that are very different. So generalization, I think, has is a great measure of whether learning has happened or not. But learning, I guess in a nutshell, is really the way that we make sense of knowledge and construct meaning. Sometimes it's a very personal, internal kind of thing, and sometimes it can be co-constructed if there's been the time to develop a collective intelligence along the way.
So this book, The Connected Educator, and your thinking sit at a really unique period of time historically. It feels as though technology is reopening old doors and opening new ones. How is that definition of learning different maybe than people would have given 5 or 10 years ago? And what's happening to our general conception of learning?
I think that that learning probably has always been social. If you go back to Plato and Socrates and that kind of thing. So I don't think, if anything, I think we've come full circle. I think that probably somewhere in the middle, we got a little mixed up and started putting the focus on teaching rather than self-directed kind of learning. And the knowledge management tools that we have today have really enabled opportunities for us to be able to connect and to collaborate and to synthesize ideas with very wide, diverse groups of people, such as are here tonight. And so I think that if anything, it's just a fantastic time to be alive because we do have such powerful tools that make it so easy to be able to co-construct and to collaborate on negotiation of meaning. And so I think that if the book has a excuse me, if the book has a certain timing to anything, it would be that learning, the way that it's situated now, enables people to come together in ways that they never were able to do before with just a couple clicks of a button and share ideas, make connections to ideas and thoughts and learning objects and individuals themselves. And I don't think that was possible before because knowledge was scarce and the ability to be able to connect to other people so easily and seamlessly just wasn't there. So I guess that's what I would say is different.
So I see the book as sort of this collective reimagining of learning. Actually, I see the book as addressing a path to collectively reimagine learning, and a path that goes through primarily educators in the bulk of the book. But I want to read some quotes that I pulled out from the book that indicate to me the degree to which I believe you're wanting us to reimagine education. You quote John Holt, "Learning is not the product of teaching, learning is the product of the activity of learners." You say, True learning, deep retention, and knowledge construction really have little to do with school or teaching. You quote Dewey, education is a social process. Education is growth. Education is not a preparation for life. Education is life itself. You say, schools have habitually prepared students for life by making them dependent on others to teach them rather than placing power over learning into learners' hands. And then you state somewhat emphatically, schools will change or become irrelevant. I say you, and of course, Laney is your co-author?
Yeah, Lonnie Ritter Hall.
Lonnie. Okay, so this collective reimagining of learning, I get the feeling from the book that you're saying that educators have an enormous amount of power to help us do this right now.
Yeah, I think they do if educators are willing to give up control to a certain extent and actually take the locus of control and put it in the learner's hands and put the learners in the seat of being able to control what it is they're going to learn so that they can have some interest-driven and some passion-driven kinds of things. I think that educators are positioned in a great time such as this if they're willing to take the posture of a learner first and that of a teacher or a leader second. If they're not afraid of reverse mentorship, if they're willing to become co-collaborators and co-knowledge makers with their students, I think it's a great time to be an educator.
So it feels like one of the givens of the book is that students and teachers and even administrators or school leaders live in somewhat parallel worlds in which they're dictated to and are following instructions. So if we're hoping that educators will bring students into a world where they are self-empowered, creating their own learning, then we have to provide that for teachers as well, right?
That's exactly right, Stephen. I think that's probably one of the pieces that I'm most passionate about the book is that we have to be willing to own it before we can give it away. You know, so often, it's kind of interesting when I talk to groups of superintendents or administrators and I talk about these different kinds of concepts that have to do with being connected and being a connected learner and a connected educator, immediately they start thinking about how this applies to their teachers in their school. And then when I talk to teachers, they immediately think about how these concepts apply and how they're going to start to implement them with their students. And it's just very intriguing to me because they bypass that we really have to own it ourselves first. We use the word collaboration a lot in education, and we talk about that, you know, we allow our kids to collaborate, and children are natural-born collaborators. And, you know, especially as I was researching for the book, I just saw the word used over and over and over again. But yet when you work with groups of teachers, and often when you work with groups of students, they're not natural collaborators. They're natural cooperators. And I think that a lot of these concepts in the book about learning how to learn is really something that we have to back up and kind of think about. I've noticed that whenever we are learning something new, we tend to start at ground zero, and it's sort of like, because it's developmental, it's sort of like you've got a couple 2-year-olds in the room, in that if you've ever watched children play that are very young, they do a parallel play kind of thing where they'll both play with their trucks or their dolls or blocks or whatever they're playing with, but they don't interact with each other too much. And I've noticed that schools are very much like that there's a lot of parallel play. And so I think that one of the ways that I set this book up, and I think what Lonnie and I did is pretty unique, I haven't seen any other book that's done it, is that we decided that we felt like that if you were really going to reculture, or if you were going to become somebody new in the way that you did things in the classroom, in the way that we did things in the school, that it really was going to take more of a systemic kind of approach, and that we decided that to change the culture, we would first have to change the behaviors. And to change the behaviors, we were first going to have to change the beliefs, the values, and the dispositions. So we thought, okay, what could we do to help people not just have a linear 20th century experience of reading the book? And we thought, why don't we have them own this idea that we're talking about, own the connectedness, own this knowledge by doing what connected educators do, connecting with each other. So one of the things that we did at the end of each chapter was we created created opportunities for people that are reading the book to go to certain spaces where they could co-construct knowledge, they could bounce ideas off of each other, they could become connected learners and connected educators by doing what connected learners and connected educators do, connect. And I don't know that there's any other book out there that has provided spaces for people to do that as they go through reading. So they do. You have to own the learning. You have to master these concepts yourself before you can start modeling, before you can start giving them away. And collaboration and connecting in a face-to-face space is not a comfortable thing for most teachers. We've seen that in professional learning communities that are done in a traditional 20th century kind of way. And it certainly is more difficult when you start to put people together in online spaces who are trying to build trust and truly get to a place that they can co-collaborate. And that's not a natural thing. So people have to work together and experience that over time, build trust, and that's what we tried to do in the book, was give people that were reading it an opportunity to do that as they went along through the chapters.
So I've had a fascinating day here at Stanford, meeting with the leaders of the Finnish education system. And I was trying to describe essentially your approach, which is in Finland there was a larger cultural commitment to equity and equality, which led to a larger systemic change that produced what they believe is quality education. Here, it seems like in the United States at least, we seem to operate on this idea of competing interests, and we have a very hard time getting to a larger cultural agreement. And so part of what I hear you saying is that in our particular culture, the path to making this change is actually in the behavior of the teachers, that they become the change agents. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. That I think that the scary part about the whole shift and about the whole change that we see education going through, and when we're looking at the differences that we're seeing, I think that one of the scary parts for teachers is that already, if you think about education, probably the most marginalized group or the most disempowered group that are in the education process are teachers themselves. I mean, the parents have a certain level of advocacy. Students, it's all about them, and it's all about the kids and student learning and that kind of thing. Administrators have formal positions of power, but teachers not so much. And when you talk about the shift and you talk about the change and you're starting to think about, well, kids can learn anything anytime they want to learn it, and we need to empower these children, and we need to help them be passion-based learners. And so you take, that threatens to take the little bit of power in a traditional kind of sense away from teachers, the little bit that they had. So there's a natural resistance where teachers are going to say, heck no, I'm not giving up the little bit that I had. And that's why this has got to be a complete reculturation, a transformation, if you will, where we have to really think about, this isn't about control, this is about shifting classrooms into communities, and then as a co-community member with my other communities of learners, my other community of learner in the classroom, so the teacher now becomes a co-collaborator, co-learner, a co-leader, that now I'm not threatened by that, because we all are, my job is to give them agency, they're giving me agency, and together we're really going to go on this learning journey and come up with some pretty interesting things that will totally change the way that we typically do education. So I do think that the teacher has to own it in order to be able to give it away. I do think that it's a dispositions and values kinds of shift, and I think that it is it's going to change the way we do professional development. It's going to change the way that we set up our classrooms. It's going to change the way, there's just going to be a whole lot of things that I'm going to have to be willing to let go of as the classroom teacher, and then I'm going to have to unlearn, but that I'm also going to be allowed to be the one that can kind of redesign it and get the kids to help me do that. And so it's a pretty exciting time if you think about what's possible.
There's a Gandhi-like element to this. It's kind of the, if you authentically will choose to live this way, to become the learner yourself, and then be a leading voice as that learner, then together we can kind of change the system. Does that let policymakers off the hook? Is that, should we be trying to do both? both influence policy and to help teachers kind of get to this level of exemplifying learning?
You couldn't hear me because my mic was off, but I was laughing when you were spinning it in that light, although I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that teacher leadership needs to be at the heart of influencing policymakers. I think that as we start to respect educators for who they are and give them, instead of having the educational process both for teachers and for students being something done to you, so that education is top-down, done to you. First we do it to the teachers, and then they do it to the kids. That when education truly starts to shift, as it should, and as it started out, when we first had people learning and doing things back many, many years ago, before it became mandated curriculum and mandated attendance, that I think that teachers will begin to be respected, that teacher leadership skills will be developed, that administrators will understand how to truly leverage those teacher leadership skills and in meaningful ways that is in the best interest of the kids, that schools will become learning organizations, and that policymakers then will come to schools and come to educators to help them really think about what is it that we need to be doing, what shift, what direction do we need to be taking. I have memories at Virginia Beach City Public Schools when I was selected to be the citywide Teacher of the Year. It's 5,500 teachers, and I was given the great privilege and honor of being selected to represent the teachers in 2002. And I remember talking to my superintendent at the time about, this is just wonderful. I'm understanding now what it means to be a teacher leader, and I'm understanding that how I can influence policy both on the local level and the state level, and using my voice in those ways. And I said, what we need to be doing is we need to have some kind of school, like a teacher school, that'll help teachers understand themselves as teacher as researcher, teacher as community leader, teacher as policymaker, teacher is PR professional, and that was seen as a very kind of scary thing, because to empower teachers to that place is going to then disempower someone else. And so I think that that this Gandhi kind of perspective that you're talking about, it is that it takes one person to make a change, and I think that it starts with your classroom and the tone that you set and the way that you enable people to be empowered. And then I think that administrators need to think about their teachers and how can they self-actualize their teachers. So often self-actualization, we only think about it in terms of kids, and how are we going to help them move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The effective administrator is going to think about how will I help my teachers then become self-actualized. We're going to enable teachers and trust them to do it-yourself professional development, where they can go out, they can build their personal learning networks, and they'll do it with purpose. They'll figure out that what I want to do is if I'm on the professional development team at school, if I'm on the curriculum team at school, then from a distributed leadership perspective, part of my responsibility in building my personal learning network is going to be to pick and choose people who around the world, in New Zealand and Australia and Brazil, that are really thinking about this idea of professional development, or thinking about this idea of curriculum, wherever my passion and my interest lies in supporting the school. And then instead of just out there chit-chatting, I'm going to very specifically take ideas back to my school and use those ideas in my own professional learning community, my face-to-face context, and we're going to use that to benefit the kids and the school as a whole. And then I'm also going to, as an administrator, I'm going to figure out how can we set up global communities of inquiry where we can bring not only the educators in my school, but other teacher leaders and other educators from around the world together, so there's a real diversity of thought. And then in very systemic ways, we're going to start to think about the shift and the changes and what works and what doesn't work, and we're going to be doing action research and sharing that. And that if you put that three-pronged approach together, Steve, where you have do-it-yourself kind of professional development by teachers themselves, who then model that and enable students to do that, in the structure of personal learning networks, you continue to have the power that that research shows us that professional learning communities, face-to-face teachers meeting and having discussions and looking at student artifacts and looking at what's working and what isn't working and how kids are learning, and then combine that with the real power of online communities of practice where educators are coming together and really having systemic conversations and doing action research together and collaboratively making a commitment to each other to improve over time, that three-pronged approach is going to reculture the school or the district or the organization that's trying to work through those steps. And it's out of that reculturation, that shared vision, those beliefs, those dispositions, that we're taking on that new paradigm that we're going to see education change, and it's going to be in the best interest of kids, and it's going to be what intuitively we all have known that it should have been.
So I'm really interested. I drink the Kool-Aid. I'm with you. You know, I have the same vision and hopes and desires. And if we think about how we reculture or we build new narratives around education, one of the things that kind of nags at me and worries me is that even with all of this excitement that you and I feel and that this whole audience feels, the opposite push, the push toward standardized testing, toward the kind of policies that are somewhat politically expedient, feels like it kind of wins. So can we actually make this difference, or is this a case of disruptive innovation where the core will have difficulty changing and it will have to be replaced?
Two ways of looking at that. You know, I don't know if you've read Ron Walk's book, Wasting Minds, but in that book, he does a really good job of building a case of where schools were and what the misconceptions are, and then he takes us into what the assumptions really should be, and then he says there's no way, just like you had said, there's just no way that that's going to happen, that there's too many people have too much at stake, and there's too much to lose, and that the powers that be are never going to do what we really need to do. So he says you need to have a parallel universe, and you need to have these spontaneous places that are growing up and sprouting and that are doing these wonderful things on behalf of kids, and then you'll have your traditional structure. And I say no. Somebody asked me, they said, what about malpractice, or what about, I think it's kind of malpractice if teachers aren't doing what's in the best interest of all children. And so I don't want a parallel universe. I do think that it's going to start with small fires, and then it's going to catch on, and it's going to become viral, and we're going to see the shift. It's kind of, there's been changes, all along. You've seen different kinds of changes as we've gone through different eras of history. So if education didn't used to be, the education of the masses, that came about with Horace Mann, and there was a whole lot of different reasons that we decided to do compulsory education. But before that, kids were able to chase their passions, and they learned on their own, oftentimes either in dame school or later in apprenticeships, where, like the father of modern mathematics came up with most of the things that he came up with while he was doing an apprenticeship serving on a shipping vessel. And so he kept notebooks, and he wrote different things in notebooks. And so then over time things changed, and we became to compulsory education. So we already saw a major shift where we went from the way we did things that in the past, and then we shifted to compulsory ed. I think that we can shift back. I think it's just going to take the next generation. You're going to have to reculture. You're going to have as more and more people begin to think about these ideas, as more and more people are willing to take risks, as more and more classrooms shift, as we begin to do action research and collect the data, as we gather evidence, and then we're going to see more people writing books, and we're going to see more classrooms, and eventually the policymakers that will be a new set of policymakers as new people come into office. I think that we are going to see the shifts that we need to see. If I ask people in this room, and I'll just ask you, if you're in the room right now in the chat, did your parents smoke? Most of us that are, 40 plus, yes, our parents smoked. And the reason they smoked is because culturally that was acceptable at the time. Everybody smoked. It's just the way things were done. And then when I was in school, they started the philosophy, Abraham Lincoln says the philosophy of the classroom in one generation would be the philosophy of the government in the next. So in my generation, they started saying, you know, smoking's bad for your health. They started showing the research. People were dying. They started gathering evidence. They did all those kinds of things. And then our generation grew up, and we were in the government, and we said no smoking. And now it's eradicated in so many places where you can go into restaurants and you can go through the city and you can go places and they're smoke-free. You know, you look at it with environmental kinds of things. So do I think that, you know, am I a skeptic? No, because I see myself as a visionary and an activist. And I think that deep inside every teacher's heart is a change agent. I think that we're all change agents if we'll just admit it. It's the reason we got into education. And I think it's a matter of just really allowing yourself to be empowered, to start to read, to start to share, to transparently, everybody should be blogging, everybody should be writing, teachers should see themselves as researchers, they should see themselves as writers, and we should really, go back to the place that we once were, where we were the provocateurs that, really kind of drove what was happening in the next generation. And I think we need to go back to that place and have that academic license, and it's going to start with a few of us realizing that we are empowered and that we are change agents, and moving forward, and then it'll catch fire. So I'm not cynical about it. I think the change can be done. In history, I think we've seen changes like that, and I think this one is truly in the best interest of kids. And so, that's what I want my epitaph to say. She left education better than she found it.
Arguing for your position would be just this sort of deinstitutionalization that the Internet has provided. On the other hand, schools like, say, the KIPP school, there are other models that are gaining enough currency, and I wonder if it won't be less homogenous, if anything, that we sort of imagine an all-encompassing solution, but in fact maybe they'll just be competing models.
So let me make one thing pretty clear. The Connected Educator really isn't a model. I'm not advocating, like the KIPP school, a particular strategy or a particular way that we need to set up our classrooms and interact with kids. And I think that actually the concepts, the three-pronged approach, and some of the concepts and techniques that I talk about in here could be applied to any kind of classroom setting that you wanted to apply it to. Because I'm pro-passion-based learning, which means that we try to tie into the kids' passion, we tie into our passion, and we work from that can come under the umbrella of using even state-mandated curriculum. I mean, you can take, I don't know if you've seen the Iron Chef, any of you watch the Food Channel? Well, in the Iron Chef, they give everybody the same ingredients, and they ask them all to prepare some dish. So you can take the state-mandated curriculum as the ingredients they've given us, but that doesn't mean that our classrooms have to be cookie-cutter, concepts of each other. I think what I've done in the book is I've tried to lay out this idea that if you want to come up with something in your school or your classroom or your district that's going to be in the best interest of kids, that the way to do that, the way to come up with those innovative ideas that are going to help kids that are 21st century learners is to connect and to collaborate with other people to share ideas and to come up with something new. Johansson wrote a book called The Medici Effect, and the Medici Effect did some studies where they looked at innovation, and what they did is they found out that if you wanted true innovation, what you had to do is you had to bring very diverse kinds of folks together. So not diversity of geography, diversity of gender, diversity of culture, but mostly diversity of ideology. And when you brought those folks together, that they could come up with a new idea. But if you had all dry cleaner workers or all shipyard builders or all teachers together, the innovation was going to be limited. And so I think what what Lonnie and I have tried to do in this book is we've really just tried to lay out the importance of connecting and drawing from others' ideas and constructing new knowledge collaboratively, and not just to do it face-to-face with the folks in your own building, but instead to go out and in network ways, which is very much about me deciding who I'm going to connect with, how much, and what I'm going to offer, and then also connecting in collaborative communities of practice where it's very deep and systemic, and there's collegial kinds of conversations instead of congenial, and there's disagreement, and that we're okay with that, and we all learn from that, and then taking what we garner from those, taking them back to our local context. And if it's KIP, then we use everything we've learned to enrich what we're doing with KIP. And if it's that we're really going to work with project, problem, passion-based, then we'll use what we're learning to do that. And that it's none of us is as smart as all of us. None of us is as good as all of us kind of concept. So I don't think it's a particular model.
I love that you mentioned Iron Chef. Regular listeners to the show will know that I've talked about these reality TV competitions and how much I like them because they show the work involved in building talent, and I think it's a very generative kind of idea. We've threatened to create a show called Extreme School Makeover. Maybe that would be fun. But let's kind of jump, because we're now about halfway through, and I want to jump to your specific kind of model for this teacher-learner. I was surprised, having read the book afterwards, that you didn't call it the Connected Learner. Is that just because people would not have gotten it from first view?
Actually, that's because the next book that I'm going to write is The Connected Learner, and it's going to be about both adult and children learners, and I'm going to get more into curriculum and philosophy and educational theory and educational practice, and really look at, what it looks like when you unwrap it in a classroom and what it looks like when you unwrap it with adults. And so really I'm going to look more at the aspect of learner. What I was trying to do from the Connected Educator is I wanted to make sure that both teacher leaders, because I feel that it takes the bravery of a teacher leader, informal positions of leadership, and that formal positions of leadership, superintendents, administrators, librarians, whatever, would curriculum folks, would also, that this title would catch their eye, and they would realize that, like you said, policymakers and superintendents and principals aren't let off the hook, that they also have to be connected, and that if they truly are going to lead in a digital age, these are the concepts that they need to be made aware of. So I struggled back and forth, and then I just decided the first book that needed to be written was one that sort of laid the foundation, if you would, and really pulled from Lonnie's and my experience of working in powerful learning practice with all the communities and the educators that we've worked with there, and all the other community work that we've done, and lay a foundation, and then build from that foundation of what it's going to look like when we take it to the individual learner.
So I love that. So I'll look forward to the second book. Okay, so you have a research background. I don't. I was kind of overwhelmed by the language of certain parts of the book, and I'll tell you what they are, and I think that they can be simplified, but there's so much language around this. There's the Connected Educator, the Connected Learner, the Teacher Learner, there are Connected Learning Communities, there are professional learning communities, there are personal learning networks, there are communities of practice, there's networked learning. So give us the value of learning these phrases and terms that come from your research background to help understand this new model, the three-pronged model that you've got.
First of all, I want you to know that when the first generation of the book, the first edition, when we were going through all the drafts and everything you have to go through when you're writing a book, it had the appendix that has the research in the back interwoven throughout the book. And a lot of people that had read it and gave their opinion just said that it was too research heavy. However, it was very important to me, since it was being written to people in formal positions of leadership, and I also hoped that it would influence heavily post-secondary, people in higher education to rethink about education, I wanted to make sure that they knew that these weren't just assertions, because so many of the books that I read that were promoting the shift, connected learning, the changes that we want to see in education, especially around these emerging technologies and the important role they're going to play in the construction of knowledge, that so many people were just making assertions and they weren't backing anything up. And so when I would dance in higher education circles, everybody would always poo-poo it as evangelism or sensationalizing. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to write a book that would lean heavily on empirical evidence of others that was already out there. So because I knew that it was going to be using not jargon so much, Peggy, but it was going to be using language that came from the generations, like starting out with looking at social learning and what that was and what Bandura and those folks say about that, and taking the specific language and running it through that. I put an appendix and a glossary, I put a glossary in the book so that people could go through and look at the different definitions. I also make a case in the beginning of the book where I talk about that a lot of these terms have been overused. Like think about learning communities and professional learning communities and personal learning communities, and when you start talking about that, it gets mind-boggling because we've all just used it to mean such different things. So what I did is I tried to specifically build a common language. I actually have a section of the book that is about developing a common language so that we can understand what we're talking about within the context of this book. And I strongly recommend any of you that are involved in professional development, even in working with your kids in the classroom, that the first thing you need to do as you're shifting your classrooms into communities and as you're shifting your schools into communities, community learning organizations, is you need to develop a common language, because definition of the terms matter. And so, like, even when I talked about the three-pronged approach, Steve, where I said, you're going to do a community of practice based on Winger's work, and I would give the pedigree there, professional learning communities, and gave, out of Horde into the fours and gave the pedigree there, and then personal learning networks, and really gave, looked at Stephen Downs and Terry Anderson and George Siemens and gave the pedigree there, that I just thought it was really important for people to understand that this is what I mean by these terms, and when the reason that I'm coming up with a brand new term, connected learning communities, is so that we don't have all that confusing language. So I put a glossary in the back of the book. I felt like it was one thing I didn't want to do that everybody kept encouraging me to do was to dumb it down. That I was told on more than one occasion that teachers were going to be reading this. Please don't be insulted, because I did not feel this way. However, I was insulted for you. That teachers were going to be reading this, and so we needed to make the language so that it was very easy to read, and it was a quick read, and people could read it on a plane, and it would be easy to understand. And I think that actually, if you want to know the truth, that's part of what's wrong with education, is I think that we've made it too easy, and that we don't, I think that you want people to grow. You want them to stretch. You want them to think deeply. You want them to, I've had people tell me that it's not a quick read, and I explained in the beginning it's not a quick read, that this is the kind of book you want to read a chapter, put it down, take some notes, think a while, do the get connected activity, talk to other people about what you're thinking, come back, go a little deeper. And the reason is that I'm hoping that all of us will begin to say, we need to really kind of up the stakes a little bit in education, that if we're going to be these change agents, teacher as change agent, if we're going to be teacher as researcher, teacher as action researcher, if we're going to do these things, then and we want the respect to come back to the education field and not be a semi-profession, but become, once again, a true profession, then we don't need an easy button. We need to really think about these terms. So that's the reason for the research base, and but I did provide the glossary, and that's the reason that I didn't dumb down the language. I don't know enough big words to just use big words to impress people, but I used the terms that were correct for what we were talking about.
So on the first read of the book, I did get confused. There were times when I understood the major distinctions, but there would be times when I thought, I'm not really quite sure what's going on. But I tried to find this again before the interview, and I couldn't. But there was a place in which you kind of equated the professional learning community with local, the personal learning network with global, and then the communities of practice with something else. What was the communities of practice? Do you remember?
Yeah, I have a copy right here, and I know what you're talking about. It's a chart that I actually was asked to put in to make it more clear. It's on page 28 of the book, and so it's
it wasn't the chart. It was at some point later you said, or maybe 28. I'm looking. My page 28 doesn't have a chart. Oh, local, global, and bounded. There you go. Exactly.
Okay.
So that really helped me.
Good. And there were a couple others that I put in there simply to kind of help people think about it. If you look on page 35, what I tried to do is compare professional learning communities, personal learning networks, and communities of practice, and then ran them through the sieve of method, purpose, structure, and focus. And I tied these three things, Steve, and I think this is where it comes together for most people, to Cochran, Smith, and Lytle's work, where Cochran, Smith, and Lytle talk about knowledge construction with educators, and they say that it's knowledge in practice, knowledge for practice, and knowledge of practice. And you know, knowledge in practice is basically what we're doing now, where it's where, well, like if you read the book, that would be knowledge for practice, where we're reading a book, we're taking a class, we're doing something where we might be more passive in the way we're going about it. The knowledge is probably new. And then you take that knowledge that you gathered in a very linear, often very traditional kind of format, and you take it into the classroom or into your leadership position, and you start trying things out. And that if nobody's there to support you or to talk about it when things aren't working, if you don't have a group of people, then you get frustrated and you just prematurely quit. You don't resist the urge to quit prematurely. You quit. And so the reason for having then the knowledge of practice, the systemic approach, is so that you can have a group of people that you can start to really talk and think deeply about these concepts with, and extend it even further into improving over time. And so that kind of is the foundation, that research, for the three-pronged approach of using your face-to-face local community, your bounded systemic community of inquiry or practice, and then also using your do-it-yourself kind of networked personal learning network that really is about you and your passions and what you're going to learn and bring back to those other two contexts.
So this is about when we shift to Q&A. I have two questions, but I'm willing to wait on them. So if you have a question for Sheryl, you can either put it in the chat, and if you've put one in the chat and I've missed it, please place it again, or you can raise your hand. And you raise your hand by clicking on the third icon over in the participant box. It's the raise hand icon, and we'll give you the microphone. It sure helps if you've tested your microphone in advance, so if you think you'd like to take the mic, go up to Tools Audio and run that audio setup wizard. Radney is saying, are you going to write a book called The Connected Parent? I love the idea.
Yeah, we actually, as I've sat down and thought about it, connected parent is something that needs to be thought more deeply. The connected learner, we thought the connected administrator, the connected superintendent, and then I even want to take it out of education and start to look at some other things. I'm a person of faith, so I thought about the connected Christian. I mean, there's a lot of different things that when we start to think about what does it mean when we are looking at educators holistically and look at who they are as a whole person rather than just looking at them as a someone who deals with cognition in a classroom with kids and, you know, instruction. And I think that, you know, it needs to be business as usual. It needs to be, you know, I heard Stephen Downs talk one time where he talked about, you know, people say, well, that's my virtual life and this is my real life, and that there really isn't any difference. And I totally agree with him that, you know, virtual is real people doing real things, and I think that the connected aspect is really just going to be business as usual. It's just going to be the way we get things done. And so I think there's lots of books out there, and maybe we should write it collaboratively. Maybe you guys should help me, and we can get it done faster.
Okay, we do have some questions that have come in. Durf wants to know, George Seaman discussed 4 metaphors of an educator: master artist, network administrator, concierge, or curator. Which one do you find most accurate? Is your mic off, maybe?
I did, sorry. I said I really like John Seely Brown's, where he talks about this idea of, I forget the way that she referred to it, but I remember it as being social artist, where he talks about this idea of that through social learning that we kind of lead a community of learners in a very artistic kind of approach in the way that we master it. So I like I like that idea. I also like curation, and I've heard some real strong arguments on Twitter when it talks about curation, because some people think of curation simply as link gathering, and so you're harvesting all these links and you're putting all. I think of curation like a museum where you actually gather the artifacts and you learn deeply about them, and then you think artistically about how you're going to display them. And so, you know, I think those would be my two favorite aspects of looking at learning from that vein.
Okay, and John Norton wanted to know, how do you know if you're a connected educator?
It's something you're born with, John. You know you're a connected educator if you're starting to connect with other people and sharing ideas. And you know, connected educators really are people that that put their learners first. They have open-minded kind of people that really enjoy learning no matter where it happens. That they're the kind of people that that get excited about inquiry, that they want to be able to learn through relationships, that they're self-directed, that they enjoy inquiry. You enjoy other people, you enjoy ideas. You don't have to be right all the time anymore. That you're drawn towards collaboration, and you see that this idea that together we're more than we are as individuals. And I think that you'll just realize that, wow, you know, I really am learning collaboratively in so many different ways instead of just being that Lone Ranger that's trying to figure it all out on my own. And I guess it's when you really do enjoy the hard work and the sweat that comes from negotiation of meaning and ideas with other people, where we have to bounce things around and it takes time and you don't always get your way, and but that each of us brings something of such value to the table that that what we end up creating is just amazing, and then you realize, wow, I'm a connected learner.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order here for those of you who asked the questions, just because I think these next two questions are better reordered. But Sam asked, how can we get teachers to find the value of creating a personal learning network that supports professional learning communities?
The only way that you're going to value something is by doing it. You know, it's so many people use the excuse of saying they don't have time. I can't develop a personal learning network, or I can't use Twitter, or I can't do these things you're saying because I simply don't have time. And I think that we make time for that which we value. And the only way that you're going to come to a place that you value something is by behaviors. You have to start with behaviors. So if you want someone to value and see the value in a personal learning network, then what they have to do is they have to build one. They have to experience one. That's why in the Connected Educator, at the end of each chapter, there are Get Connected activities, so that people are going onto VoiceThread, they're bouncing ideas around. If you had never built a personal learning network and all of a sudden now you're connecting with people, I saw two people that are in this room right here that had never met each other, didn't know about each other, found each other through the reflection on a blog post that somebody did around the book. Another person was reading it, came across their Google Alerts, they went to that blog post, and then they started, you know, they now are in each other's personal learning network. So I think the way that you can't just force things on people. You can't say, you know, I've done it and you should too. If you want somebody to appreciate golf, take them golfing. And if you want somebody to appreciate building a personal learning network, get them involved in it. And that's what Lonnie and I tried to do in the book.
So the follow-up question then would be from Birdie, who says, how can teachers best network with other teachers?
Best network. Birdie, can you help me understand that question a little bit more?
I think she's asking for maybe what practices or what networks would you go to? Do you use Twitter? Do you use Facebook? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think because I'm a strong believer, as I've said, in the three-pronged approach, and I think networking has its place. And so I'm going to answer your question in isolation, but I don't like to, I think that if you have just one, like if you just network and you don't do the face-to-face professional learning community building in your own local context, whether that's at home with your family or if that's at school with your colleagues, and you don't do the online community of practice piece where you're deeply and systemically going to conversations, that you're only going to have one piece of it. I think it's a three. You need all three for it to be sticky, if you will. But I'm going to take your question in isolation, and I'm going to say, okay, if we're just thinking about the network piece, how do you do the best networking? I think rather than trying to be on every single tool, because you'll wear yourself out, that you need to pick 2 or 3, and you do that through experimentation, that really work best for you. And one of the things that I think people need to be is strategic in the way they think about it. I don't think that you need to do the same kinds of learning and sharing and networking on Twitter that you do on Facebook or LinkedIn or on Google+. You know, that if you're going to, I think you pick 1 or 2 tools and you do very different things there. For instance, when I'm on Twitter, Twitter will be where I am truly networking. I am connecting to other people. I am sharing what I have to bring to the table. Here's what I've created. Do you want some of it? This is what I'm doing. Look, here's a chart I made. Look, here's a course we're offering. This is what I'm doing. I want to share this with you. And then I want to harvest what other people are doing. Oh, cool. This is a great thought. This is a great, I'm going to go visit, I'm going to come to this kind of session with what Steve's doing. I'm going to look over here at what they're doing. I'm going to take part in that. And then on Facebook, I've noticed that when I put out really deep kinds of questions that I'm seriously interested in, that I really want to know what people think, that's where people take the time to respond to that. Or maybe a hashtag-driven chat. You know, I've gotten a lot of value out of those, even though in Twitter they're kind of fast-paced and I like to go a little deeper. So sometimes I take the transcript from a hashtag-driven chat, and then I pick and choose different pieces that I think fit together, and I'll put them together in Storyfy or something, or I'll even take it and then put it into one of my communities of practice where I really learn a lot, and then ask people, what do you think about this that these people were saying, and then go deeper on that particular topic. So for me, I think the secret to effective networking is to not use so many tools that you become ineffective and that you get overwhelmed and that it doesn't make sense for you. You know, don't be like lemmings. You know, I think often every time a new tool comes, those of us that are in all these spaces will run over to that tool, and then we'll run over to that tool, and we'll run over to this tool. Instead, be purposeful. That you need to have a very purposeful plan and network with purpose so that you don't wear yourself out, so that there is balance and you have time for your own family.
So it occurs to me, because George Koros is coming on, we didn't use your slides at all. We didn't need them. But I'm going to go to the list here of upcoming interviews, because I don't think it's Alex. It is Alex that's coming on, or George? I think it's George who's coming on. And I may have made a mistake there, because I think he's going to come on and talk about how, as a school leader, you create the environment for teachers to be these kind of engaged learners. But do you have any advice in this regard?
On how school leaders would what?
How school leaders can create an environment that actually allows teachers to be the kind of engaged learners that you're describing? Yeah.
What you need to do is, if you look at schools that use professional learning communities out of the rich heritage that we have with the DeFores or the Eckers or Shirley Hord, you're going to see that is the best hope. I mean, Linda Darling Hammond, you can see researcher after researcher that will tell you that turning your school into a learning community using professional learning community strategies is the best hope we have for reculturing those schools. Now, I would go one step further, so if educational leaders are listening to me, I think that's the best hope we had for reculturing schools in the 20th century. What I think we need to do now is we need to really think about what will professional learning communities look like as we bring them into the 21st century. And I think that is where we're going to have to be creating distributed leadership models that empower or enable teachers to become empowered, that we have to think about the self-actualization of the teacher, that we have to trust them, that we have to start to give credit for the time they spend in the do-it-yourself kind of professional development, that we have to see value in that and then provide means for those teachers to bring what they're learning back to the local context. I think that just like I talked about changing your classroom into a community, you need to think about changing your schools into learning organizations where you lead, but you lead from a distributive perspective so that different strengths and values that certain teachers have, that you let everybody be the CEO of something, and that if I'm particularly good at this, then I'm going to teach the other teachers about that, even if I'm the 4th grade teacher. And if somebody that's in the 1st grade is really good at this, then we're all going to learn that from her. And it used to be that it was important what you knew, and that as an educator I needed to memorize and take the praxis and prove mastery of what I knew, and then I would be deemed appropriate and I could go forth and I could become a teacher. Then, it became more important as time went on and things started to change. It was who you knew. And we were told that you wanted to rub elbows with people in central office, and you really wanted to be, build your network and become very good at who you know, and start to build that network and really say, well, I'm connected to the governor, I'm connected to this person at state office, I'm connected to this person. Well, in the 21st century, I think that the focus has shifted again, and I think George or Alec, know both men and respect them well, but I think they both would tell you that it's not what you know, it's not who you know. It's do you know what who you know knows. And that is at the heart of building a network, is figuring out what each individual person in your school is good at, and then helping us all to leverage what they know, so that none of us are as smart as all of us, and together we're going to change the world and put it in the best interest of the kids that we serve.
So our guest tonight has been Sheryl Nussbaum-Beach, and I'm clapping for her. You can do this now in this new version of Blackboard Collaborate by hovering over the smiley face, then going down to the applause button. Sheryl, thanks so much. Your book is The Connected Educator. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and really appreciate your coming on the show.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it, and thank you for all that you're doing to make education better for kids. I love the legacy that you're leaving and the way that you are a change agent, and that through the interviews and the knowledge that you're sharing and the synthesis that you're helping all of us to accomplish through the actual weaving of the ideas that you do, that the world is going to be a better place because of you having been here. So thank you for letting me be a small part of that.
Oh, no, thank you. Most appreciated. Coming up, well, I keep going to the wrong slide here. Coming up Thursday night, Henry Eyring on the Innovative University, and then next week, Lee Crockett and Cable Green. Thanks to Sheryl. Thanks to you for attending or listening. We sure appreciate it as we talk about the future of education. Take care, everybody.